Welcome back, Focus Learners. We've got a genuinely fascinating explainer for you today. We're going to break down two really major recent interviews featuring former Borno State Governor Ali Madu Sheriff and former Inspector General of Police Mike Okiro. We're unpacking these conversations because, frankly, they reveal some massive, foundational shifts currently happening in Nigeria's economy and its security apparatus. There's a whole lot to cover, and if you're keeping an eye on how power operates today, the implications here are absolutely huge. So let's just dive right in.
It really comes down to the defining question of Nigerian politics right now. Does the heavy weight of the country's current economic hardship and this rampant, devastating insecurity rest solely on the shoulders of the federal government and the president? Or does the blame, and ultimately the responsibility for fixing it, lie somewhere else entirely?
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the accountability debate, move into the financial focus, look ahead to the 2027 chessboard, explore the state police dilemma, and finally, look at what it actually takes to fix a broken force.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the accountability debate.
Now, former Governor Sheriff doesn't mince words here. According to him, President Bola Tinubu's highly criticized removal of the fuel subsidy wasn't just some casual policy choice, it was an absolute necessity. Sheriff argues that these were incredibly painful but essential economic reforms. In fact, he boldly asserts that if the administration hadn't removed the subsidy exactly when it did, Nigeria would have literally defaulted on its monthly bills. The country simply couldn't afford it anymore.
Moving right along to Section 2, shifting the financial focus.
Guys, the sheer scale of this financial shift is, well, it's staggering. Sheriff points out that today, some states are receiving upwards of 55 billion naira in federal allocations in a single month. To put that massive number into perspective, Sheriff claims that during his entire 8-year tenure as governor of Borno State, his administration received a total of about 150 billion naira across 8 whole years. The wealth transfer to the states happening right now is unprecedented, and it fundamentally restructures where the true economic power actually lies.
So why does this matter? Well, under the Nigerian constitution, security and local governance fall right under the concurrent legislative list, meaning authority is shared. Sheriff's argument is that because state governors and local district heads are now receiving these massive, record-breaking funds, they have to bear the ultimate responsibility. They have to use this money to fight poverty and insecurity in their own backyards, instead of just pointing fingers at the president.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 2027 election chessboard.
Sheriff maps out this unwritten post-Civil War agreement among Nigerian political leaders regarding the rotational presidency, and he shares this incredibly vivid story from 1991. The late General Muhammad Shua actually demanded Sheriff's support for a strict north-south power rotation as a condition for political backing, even going so far as to show Sheriff the bullet wounds he suffered for the country. It's wild to realize how these deeply personal historical moments dictate modern politics. Because the North held power for 8 years under former President Buhari, Sheriff is absolutely insistent that the South must hold it until 2031 under Tinubu, meaning prominent Northern candidate Atiku Abubakar, according to Sheriff, simply has to wait his turn.
And when evaluating the opposition, Sheriff makes a pretty bold, albeit controversial claim. He states that candidate Peter Obi will never secure Northern votes in 2027. He bases this on allegations that Obi chased Northerners out of Anambra State back during his tenure as governor there. Now, whether you agree or disagree with Sheriff's take, it perfectly highlights the intense, regional calculations that are already dominating the 2027 chessboard.
Okay, on to Section 4, the state police dilemma. So, where does Sheriff stand on state police? He is fully on board with the president's push for a state police bill. And why? Because right now, governors are the chief security officers of their states in name only. They can't legally arm their local security outfits, yet they are somehow expected to fight off heavily armed thugs, bandits, and non-state actors operating freely within their borders. Sheriff argues you simply can't hold governors accountable for security if you don't constitutionally authorize them to carry the weapons they need to fight back.
But it's never quite that simple, right? This is where the debate gets incredibly complex. On one side, you have the very obvious benefits of local security and rapid response. On the other side, enter former Inspector General of Police Mike Okiro. Okiro openly shared his initial deep-seated fears that without heavy checks, state governors would just abuse their own armed police forces. They'd use them to chase away political opposition and basically create private armies of thugs, dragging Nigeria right back to the chaotic political violence of the 1960s.
Now here's the twist. Okiro actually evolved his stance. He cautiously supports state police today, but only under one absolute non-negotiable condition: Stringent, ironclad constitutional guidelines have to be implemented first. There must be federal checks and balances to protect these local units from the political whims and high-handedness of state governors. If regulated properly, Okiro believes it could actually work.
Let's pivot to Section 5, fixing a broken force. When looking at real solutions, we have to start with Okiro's grim, boots-on-the-ground diagnosis of the current federal police structure. It is blunt, and honestly, it's sobering. He describes a force fundamentally starved of funding. They're the lead agency for internal security, expected to perform literal miracles, but the reality? They are utterly demoralized, severely understaffed, terribly ill-equipped, and poorly paid.
And this systemic failure has a devastating human cost. Okiro poses a heartbreaking question. How do you expect police to work when stations might have a handful of vehicles but absolutely zero budget for fuel? Imagine going in to report a crime and there isn't even electricity for an officer to write down your statement. It just highlights the sheer impossibility of fighting nationwide terrorism when you literally can't even keep the lights on.
To put this into perspective, Okiro talked about an eye-opening visit he made to Precinct 42 in the Bronx, New York. Despite warnings about insurance risks, he insisted on doing a ride-along. He saw heavily armored vehicles, incredible communication tech, officers working confidently in pairs. The contrast with Nigeria's officers, who are unequipped, unmotivated, and often sent into extreme danger completely alone, left him feeling really dejected about the state of his home country's force.
But wait, it's not all hopeless. Okiro offers historical proof that this can be fixed, and it all comes down to one number: 41,000. During his tenure, he successfully petitioned the president to raise a constable's salary from an unlivable 5,000 naira a month straight up to 41,000 naira. He argued that an officer couldn't even feed their family on 5,000, let alone focus on catching criminals. And you know what happened? When that salary bump hit, Nigeria recorded its lowest crime rate for that entire year. Proper welfare directly equals better security.
Okay, let's do some quick math here, because this part is just mind-blowing. The UN standard for policing is 1 officer for every 400 citizens. But Okiro makes this brilliant point, that UN standard assumes those officers are fully equipped with mobility, armor, and comms. Because Nigerian officers lack all of that, Okiro estimates that to achieve the exact same level of security, Nigeria would realistically need 1 officer for every 20 to 30 citizens. The lack of basic equipment multiplies the manpower deficit exponentially.
Then you have to factor in the massive daily toll on officer welfare. Okiro tells this story about a principal officer posted in the high-end district of Maitama in Abuja. Because there are no police barracks provided, this officer has to live incredibly far away in Kefi just to afford rent. He spends exorbitant amounts of his meager salary and hours of his day just commuting. By the time he actually arrives at work to protect the public, he's already exhausted and financially drained.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, despite their vastly different backgrounds, a seasoned politician and a former top cop, Sheriff and Okiro point to the exact same undeniable conclusion. True security and economic progress in Nigeria seem to require a massive decentralization. It requires shifting immense resources, accountability, and the very power of policing away from the federal center and putting it directly into the hands of the states. Which brings us to the million-dollar question. If we decentralize, if we give state governors massive financial allocations and hand them the constitutional right to control their own armed police forces, is this the ultimate, localized solution Nigeria so desperately needs? Or are we just setting up the pieces for a dangerous new chessboard? Let that sink in. Thank you for joining this explainer. Focus learners, keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.